It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You can reach me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting through my website, emailrevealer.com. If you like today's show, be sure and check out OppermanReport.com, where we have our members section with all kind of exclusive content and additional shows that you won't find anywhere online. And as always, our archives are free, and you can get our free archives at Spreaker.com. And if you go to Spreaker.com, I want you to look up our guest here, Lenny Flatley, okay? Joseph L. Flatley, who we've had on the show previously. And also, if you go to Spreaker, the only place you can find it on my stuff is on Spreaker. It's not on YouTube or anything like that. We're playing his whole series, his previous series he did on the so-called Prophet of Pittsburgh. But you can find that directly from Lenny at lennyflatley.net. Mr. Flatley, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me.
Am I pronouncing that right, Flatley or Flatley?
Flatley.
Flatley, okay.
Yeah,
like Flatley Earthly. Okay. Remind the audience, man, who is, and you like to be called Joseph or Lenny?
You can call me Joseph. That's my byline. I make it confusing. I use both. But.
Yeah, I know. What do you got, warrants? What's going on? What's going on there, buddy?
Well, Gene.
Remind the audience who is Joseph Flatley, Lenny Flatley.
I am a journalist based in Pittsburgh. I cover, just fringe topics, anything that's kind of unusual or out of the mainstream. And the reason I like those kind of topics that you cover, is because I don't think they're really that unusual. I think people think they are. People don't like to kind of acknowledge how strange the average human being is or how much this stuff goes on. So the reason I'm here is I did this 8-part investigation podcast called The So-Called Prophet from Pittsburgh, where I really got to know ex-members of this cult in Arizona with a leader from Pittsburgh called the Global Community Communications Alliance, and kind of told the story of the leader and of the cult and of the cult's former followers and how they're trying to deal with putting their life together after having been in this cult.
Gotcha. So, and since the last time you've been on our show talking about the so-called Prophet of Pittsburgh, there's been some new developments?
Yeah. Kind of the biggest thing is I revealed on the show that there's been incidents of sexual abuse that happened in the cult. Incidents that have been kind of swept under the rug by the cult leadership. Not that they condoned it or committed any of these acts, just that they didn't want to deal with it. Since we spoke, one of the victims heard my podcast and decided to come forward. 2 victims came forward, actually. One, I protecting her identity, and the other one is this woman in Indiana now who was raised in the cult since she was 2 years old.
Yeah, that's really common. When you do these podcasts, these radio shows and stuff like that, people who are involved in the case hear about it and they contact you with all kinds of new information. Mm-hmm. That happens all the time. Yeah.
No, I have so many stories that I can't use because people are afraid to come out. But they'll tell me their stories, but they don't want me to use them or use their name or do it on background.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, and for good reason, too many times. So give us an idea. What went on with the 2 sexual abuse cases?
Okay, well, they were both children who, from a very young age, were brought into the cult by their parents, or whose parents, were in the cult. And so it's not like they joined. One girl was 6 years old, and they had this homeless guy who they brought into the group, and who's kind of their success story. The cult rehabilitated him, quote unquote, and they made him the caregiver of the kids, and he would expose himself to the children and speak inappropriately to the children, and one asked the one little girl to sleep naked with him. And then he eventually got kicked out, and it's not entirely clear if he got kicked out for doing this or if he got kicked out and then the kids came forward. But at any rate, he's no longer with the group. But there's this other guy who's abused at least two people that I've spoken to. You know, he was a teenager and a young adult, and he was abusing young girls, and he's still there. He actually came forward to the cult's leadership and admitted some nasty stuff as far as exposing himself to children in the community, and I believe he said he was a pedophile and even like sex with animals. And the cult they didn't call law enforcement. They didn't they didn't deal with it other than to say, you're not allowed around kids anymore. And this is the story I've heard. And, they said, you're not allowed around kids anymore, and we're going to pray for you, basically. The cult leader thinks he's the highest spiritual authority on the planet, so why would he go to the police when they could just kind of like pray the problem away? So he's still running around there, and he's a valuable member of the community. They're not. It seems to me that they're not really inclined to get rid of people if they're good workers, and that's the whole scam here. Is they have all these businesses that they're operating that they're able to make a ton of money because they have so much free labor.
Did any of these teachers ever suffer any kind of a criminal investigation?
All right, so there's one guy. His name is Danny Joseph Gonzalez. He was a children's teacher, and he pleaded guilty last December to one count of attempted sexual conduct with a former student who was 14 years old. It was a bizarre case because he was the ex-husband of the cult leader's daughter, and they had a child, and he was fighting for custody of the kid. And I just have to believe that if that wasn't the case, if he was just anybody, that they wouldn't have bothered going after him. They'd figure he's out of the community. That's fine. But, the fact that the cult leader really doesn't like him, it's his ex-son-in-law, had to have play a part in this. So this girl came forward. She said basically that this Danny Joseph Gonzalez, started texting back and forth with her, messaging her, and then they started meeting up. And eventually there's you can hear excerpts of a video that I was able to attain on my podcast, and it's a welfare, some sort of social worker interviewing the girl about the crimes. And the cult went after him hardcore, and it was originally there were like 10 counts, and it got taken down to one count of attempted sexual conduct, and that's what they busted him for. And he went away in December, and he's looking at 7.5 years inside.
Yeah, usually these guys, they serve 3.5 years of an 8-year sentence. That's exactly what the average is out there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's amazing.
Okay.
Everyone, you always see these memes online saying, "Oh, we should execute pedophiles." We don't even give them 10 years. People execute. Are you kidding me, man? Because people think they get these long sentences. They really don't. And if it's a family member, it's some of these cases. If it's a family member, like 6 months.
Oh, really?
It's outrageous. Now, this young girl, the 14-year-old, how long ago did this happen?
So this Danny Joseph Gonzalez was arrested in February of 2019. Okay. So he left the community in 2018. So it happened in sometime in 2018, I believe.
And the 14-year-old is still a member of the cult.
Yeah. Her family are high-ranking, are important members of this cult, and they're still there. And all the families in this cult have been divorced at least once, and so it's like one big extended family. So it's like she's got a mother and a stepmother and sisters, and so it's like they're well ingrained in it. And this didn't shake their faith in it at all. They didn't like see, well, our kids are being abused, we should rethink about whether or not we want to be in this cult. Their faith was not shaken at all by this event, it doesn't seem.
And is Danny Gonzalez, are there any other allegations from other students or other children there in the cult?
No. I mean, I've spoken to, just speaking of rumors, he doesn't seem like outside the cult, he seems like he's a lot of girlfriends, a lot of relationships that didn't end well, but might be a little bit of a player, but I don't think he was like I think this was a crime of opportunity. I think he saw this 14-year-old girl that, didn't look like a 14-year-old girl, looked more adult, and, he's not probably not the most ethical person, and thought he'd take advantage of this opportunity. I don't think, but he's, there are other people in the community, or at least one other person in the community who I think is a serial predator. So it's definitely like there are people walking around, and Danny's cousin, allegedly, who is also a teacher, allegedly attacked a 10-year-old boy, not sexually, but just was teaching him and got frustrated and kicked him, and kicked him a bunch of times and left bruises on him, and that's an allegation that's working its way through the Santa Cruz County Sheriff Department, county attorney right now. So I mean, seems like there's a lot of poorly behaved adults here and a lot of children that are at risk just because they're around them.
Yeah, but the 10-year-old was the gentleman that I interviewed, right? That
yes.
was his son, right? Okay. And what was his name again?
The gentleman you interviewed?
Yeah.
Or the,
oh, no, that's right. No, don't say his name because we didn't air that interview. I never aired that interview.
Oh,
We're still holding that back. Yeah, I forgot all about that. There's so much going on here with this virus.
Oh, I know.
It confused me all over the place. And, now, so the 10-year-old was assaulted. Okay, we got that one. All right. That's still under investigation. All right. And then what is going on now? You're saying that the cult is in the hemp business now?
Oh, yeah. So the way that this Danny Gonzalez got into the cult was he was living in, I think it was Washington State, but he was part of this startup company. It was like, it was just some goofy company that like sold bracelets over Instagram to, millennials or whatever. But it was worth, like, I've heard, from multiple sources, that it was worth like $1 million. So it was a pretty big company. And Gabriel and the cult leaders heard that these people were interested in the cult and kind of like recruited members of this company, thinking they were going to take over this company and get all these assets and have this profit stream. And it didn't work well. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because there's a pattern. It seems like the cult figured out this way to absorb businesses, and so there's So they recently announced that they were starting this hemp farm called Mystic Farms. And the way they got into this business, I've heard, is that they hired a company, a consultant company that like taught them how to do the hemp business. And then through working with them, were able to like sucker, like recruit a couple members of this company and basically halved the company and took it over. And now they have this huge hemp farm, which I mean, that's got to be a major revenue stream, seeing as how, once again, they're not paying anybody, or they're, most of their labor force is volunteer.
Now, is marijuana legal in Arizona?
I'm not sure. I mean, they're doing industrial hemp without THC, so. But I don't.
Even that, a short time ago, you weren't allowed to grow that. Just
right.
Everything's changed suddenly.
Yeah,
for all these guys. Yeah. All right, so now they're in the growing the hemp business over there down at the cult. What else is going on with these cult members down there?
Oh, just that they're kind of locked in because of COVID-19. It's like a couple members escaped a couple months ago, and which I don't think they've had any escapes in a while. It goes in waves, like a few years ago, like 5 or 6 people left all around the same time, or 10 people left around the same time. And then it's quiet for a while. And then they had like a couple people leave this early this spring, I guess this winter, a few months ago. And that's how we learned about the farm, the Mystic Farms, and and how they kind of did that. And but yeah, they're locked down. The cult leader himself, Gabriel Fiorancha, he was recently in the hospital with a broken hip. So I think they're kind of like looking towards the future. Like, the guy's in his 70s. He's been hospitalized a number of times. They're just trying to figure. My feeling is that they're trying to figure out what to do in the future? Like, so that's the question. Like, they have two kids that are supposed to be, the leader has two children that are supposed to be like taking over the reins when the parents step down. But you also have these business managers. You have these so-called elders who are like the leadership of the cult that have actually been managing this business, which is worth at least millions of dollars. The Corporation Commission in Arizona no longer requires nonprofits to say how much money they have in their corporate filings. That's as of 2008. But in 2008, they were worth like $22 million, according to these records. So I'm sure that's a very conservative estimate. I don't have it right in front of me, but, another, couple $20 million or something, I believe, in real estate. That's a very conservative estimate. So this is a big operation. I might be getting these numbers wrong, but what I'm trying to get at is there's millions of dollars at play here. It's a big company, basically a big operation, and I don't think they're going to hand it over to these kids, that don't have any training in this, that don't have any common sense because they've never lived in the real world. So yeah, it's in flux. It'll be really interesting to see where it goes.
And it could turn out one of those situations of mass suicide, when the leader goes.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like you don't have any sense of. I mean, you look at Waco or you look at Jonestown. None of those people knew until the very last second that was coming. That was all handled by the leadership. Now, I don't get the sense that that's who this group is. I think it's all an opportunity for Gabriel, the cult leader, to live like a king. I don't think he's like really interested in, that stuff. I think this is just like a good business for him, but I don't know, and it's like, it's a dangerous situation having a bunch of people locked off like that in the middle of nowhere.
Are there any cases of COVID-19 on the compound there?
Not that I'm aware of, but they're, like I said, they're locked down, and they're not like, there's a couple people, they're not supposed to have any contact with outsiders. There's a couple people that I know of that just can't resist, like, getting on Facebook and arguing with ex-members, So it's like, that's how, like, most of the information was coming out, but that's dried up. Like, especially since this podcast came out, they're really just keeping to themselves right now, as far as I can tell.
Right. And your podcast, The So-Called Prophet of Pittsburgh, right, we can find over at LennyFlatley.com.
.net.
LennyFlatley.net. Net. Okay. Have you had any response from this group since you started playing the podcast?
Not at all. I've had, like, right when it started, like, one of the cult leader's daughters emailed me, but she thought she was being clever and using like a fake email address, but I could tell it was her, asking some questions. And then when I didn't get back to her, she, basically said, she acknowledged that she had heard the podcast, but the one ex-member who's on the outside, the one member of Gabriel's family who's on the outside, I know that they've complained to her about it, but I haven't had any communication at all.
Because aren't they very litigious?
They are, but yeah, I don't know. I really can't explain it, and I'm just not. I'm just, counting my blessings, I guess.
Well, I guess maybe it's just mostly to members and ex-members that want to go after people that are in their close circle that they want to keep in court. Yeah. I mean, you even see that with these custody cases, like the person that we talked to, both that we're not naming right now, he was close to the higher ups of the cult. So when he left, they really wanted to nail him. So they spent years in court trying to in this nasty custody case. But there's another guy that left that I haven't spoken to yet, but people have told me that he filed for custody for his kid, and Gabriel was like, "Yep, just take him, get him out of here." So it's like the legal stuff really does seem to be, like you said,
a means to attack certain like kind of high value ex-members.
How many daughters does this guy have?
So he has twin daughters, one named Delavan, who's still in the group, and Sanskrita, who left, who is featured on several episodes of my podcast. And then he has a son named Amadon, who's set to take over whenever Gabriel, goes on to the next universe or whatever. And then he has a young daughter. He has a third daughter who's the youngest, who was married to this Danny Joseph Gonzalez character.
That's fascinating stuff, man.
Yeah, it's endless.
Yeah, I know. Now, what else can we expect to hear coming out in the future from this group, on your investigation?
Well, right now I'm doing kind of like the actual investigation is run its course with 8 episodes. I might do a second season, but I've been doing a lot of bonus episodes, so interviews with just like people who have been calling me after hearing it saying, oh, I want to tell you my story. And I'm telling individual stories about these characters, and I actually have a new podcast. It's called Failed State Update, which is going to be handling these cult stories and just other investigations that I'm doing. So that's my current project. But if they go to lennyflatley.net, they can see the cult stuff. They can see my new stuff. It's all up there.
Yeah, when we get back from this commercial break, I want to ask you about Failed State. Failed State. What's it called? Failed State. Right?
Failed State Update.
Oh, yeah, it does say update. Yeah, okay. I thought it was just an update. Yeah, but Failed State Update. We're going to ask you about that when we get back. We're talking to Lenny Flatley, who's the expert on the so-called prophet of Pittsburgh. He revealed this story to the world. You can catch it at his podcast of So-Called Prophet of Pittsburgh that you can find at lennyflatley.net. And I'm going to be talking to him about his, when we come back from the break, about his newsletter he's putting out, and also about his new podcast, Failed State Update. We'll be right back with more of Lenny Flatley after these messages.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with Lenny Flatley. You can find him at lennyflatley.net. He's did this incredible series of podcasts about the so-called prophet of Pittsburgh that you can find on lennyflatley.net. He's got a newsletter coming out, and I'm going to be talking about his new podcast, Failed State Update. Tell us about the newsletter first, Lenny.
So the newsletter is also called Failed State Update, and it's kind of a complementary to the podcast. And basically, I've been covering these kinds of fringe stories, my whole career basically. And they've just been slowly crawling towards the center of American life, And then with this COVID stuff, forget it, all bets are off. Everybody's talking about, all these things that seemed really fringy and weird are just part of the discourse, militias, protesting at state houses and, these COVID conspiracies and stuff. And, I think these kind of stories are important, and I just want to have a venue where I can look at them intelligently and, in newsletters and podcasts, self-produced newsletters and podcasts seem to be the way to go. It's, it's almost impossible to get editors interested in this stuff, or if they are interested in it, they already have their guys. So I'm doing, I'm going straight to the people, so to speak.
Okay, so the first episode, Militia Dudes and Juggalos. What do we have? Juggalos are those guys from the Insane Clown Posse, right?
Right. Yeah, so that is one. I'm kind of doing a mix with the podcast of like more interview-based stuff like we're doing now, and then the more heavily produced documentary investigations like So-Called Prophet from Pittsburgh that are almost more like a documentary. And but that one I felt the need to like just get out because I'm in Western Pennsylvania, so we have our share of like militia people out in the county. I'm in the city of Pittsburgh, but you spend half an hour driving east, and all of a sudden you're in Kentucky, and essentially. And so I was hearing about all these reopen the economy protests, and then just seeing the people with the guns show up, and it's like it's like what is going on here? So I called a couple militia leaders that I know, and just asked them what their take on the reopen protests were, and it was really interesting. The one guy was very much politically conservative. We should reopen the economy, people need to work, which I understand. A lot of liberals on Twitter or whatever are hating on people who are trying to reopen the economy because they just, they think they're mindless, Trump followers. But, there's, whether or not you agree with it, and I don't agree with it, there's a lot of real legitimate concerns that people have about, being unemployed and not having money. And, what good is surviving COVID-19 if you, lose your house? So I spoke to the one militia leader about that. And then the other militia leader was the complete opposite. He was like, yeah, we're tied into this militia network. We talk to people all over the world, all over the country, people who are in military all over the world, people who are in medicine. And, we're convinced that COVID is real. Our contacts tell us that this is real and to take it seriously. So we're not going to any protests. We're not having any large gatherings. We're preparing for the worst. So that episode was my opportunity to kind of like get out of the media bubble, the Twitter bubble, and actually see what these people that you usually only ever read about are actually thinking about this stuff. And it was just really interesting that I just thought it was kind of amusing that the one militia guy was like reopen the economy, and that was the same time that the Juggalos canceled their gathering. The Insane Clown Posse have an annual concert called the Gathering of the Juggalos, and they canceled it this year because of COVID. And they were like, they're Insane Clown Posse, but they were very like serious, and they were very like smart about it. They're like, not one Juggalo life is worth it to have this party. So it's like, these are the guys with the common sense. These are the guys with the brains. The guys dressed up in clown makeup. So that's where we went with the first episode.
I don't know. The world with a few less juggalos might be better off. I'd tell you something. You talk about these militia guys showing up with guns at protest. We, I was very active back in Las Vegas. All the Black Lives Matter protests, all the anti-Trump, Fight for 15, everything. I was in all police shootings. And there was this one. She pops up. I talked to the organizer. No one ever heard of this chick. MoveOn.org was behind it. They busted all these people from California. One of the hotels let them use the parking garage to park their cars for free, and even gave them free water bottles. And also, too, there was this big staged incident where they sat down in the street and they blocked traffic, and the cops actually blocked the traffic off from a parking garage so that people couldn't come out of the park for this staged event where they ran up to a fence and tried to knock this fence down when there was construction going on. And that was the only incident we ever had where some militia types showed up with rifles. The whole thing was just so suspicious. Nobody knew anybody that was running this thing. And I actually, when I was asking around about it, they kicked me out of the Facebook.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Announcement for it. I said, who are you guys? No one's heard of you. So that was I always look at these protests with a suspicious eye, man.
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing, it only took a second for the for people to scratch the surface of these reopen the economy protests and find, Turning Point USA and these like Tea Party groups, So I mean, it's obvious that this is all coordinated by somebody trying to make political hay. But it's still useful to talk to the people that are actually there, and they don't see it that way. And I get maybe that's the real story. It's like that people are being, drawn into these protests, and it doesn't occur to them that they're being used.
Exactly. Now, what about Amazon.com and the crisis? Christian Smalls. That name sounds very familiar.
Oh, yeah. Christian Smalls. He was the guy who worked at Amazon in Queens at the huge fulfillment center there that became kind of like an epicenter of COVID-19 cases among Amazon. And basically, Amazon wasn't doing anything about COVID. Like, when people turned up sick, since they didn't turn up sick at work, they wouldn't close things down. even though we all know that if you get sick, you've been walking around spreading this thing for the last week. So this guy, Christian, he's a really good guy. He was never like an activist or never in like the labor movement or anything, but he was some sort of manager at Amazon, and his employees started getting sick. So he thought, I can't let this happen. So he stopped going to work. He stopped clocking in. And every day he would go into Amazon, into the break room, and spend his 8-hour shift instead of working, like getting news and telling all the people there that, getting the latest news and notifying everybody what's going on. This is how many cases. This person was sick. If you were around this person, you should go home. And eventually Amazon fired him for it. And he's kind of become like the national leader, national spokesperson of these Amazon anti-Amazon protests, because it's absolutely crazy. It's not like the Amazon fulfillment centers. That's not food. That's not essential items. That's, books and batteries and, remote controls and Kindle Fire sticks, stuff that like overwhelmingly are not necessary. And, they should shut these places down or slow them down so they can properly remediate, handle the spread of virus. But Amazon's not doing that, and Jeff Bezos, as you know, is really raking it in during this like coronavirus, everybody staying home in order from Amazon thing. So we just kind of went into those issues.
Yeah, we're already seeing for rent signs on small businesses all over the place down here where I'm living now. So obviously, all those sales going to be going to Amazon, and.
Yeah,
with a whole new economy moving forward, and a lot of opportunism going on here for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And I work from home, and my office window overlooks the street. And ever since the quarantine started, all day it's UPS, FedEx, Amazon vans up and down the street. It's like it was never like this before. So people are literally just, if they can afford it, they're just staying home and ordering stuff online all day. And if they can't afford it, they're going to work and getting sick and getting their families sick.
Some things you have to, like those masks, you couldn't get them anywhere. You had to order them online.
Right.
Now, what about Laura Johnson Cole? Name sounds very familiar. She was been on my show?
She might have been. She's done the rounds. She's a she was at Jonestown. Right. She was a member of People's Temple, and she lived in Jonestown and then got kicked out of Jonestown or sent away from Jonestown right before the mass massacre, suicide that, claimed 918 lives. And the reason I told her story is, it's historical, but it's still certainly relevant. We got into her political motivations and really talked about how people think Jonestown, they think like mindless cult members, or it's a religious cult, or, they're worshiping the guy. But really, she was not like that. And a large portion of the people that joined because they really were a political justice organization that was doing good work. And it just all got perverted by Jones at the top, and with this tragic outcome. So I think nowadays more than ever, people need to be skeptical of leaders. And so it's a historical story, but I think it's really relevant to 2020.
Yeah, Jones had his own intel suspicious behavior and connections going on there. Mark Lane over there. What the hell was he up to? I think I remember talking to Cole about that, or one of those Jonestown people, about how they were all held at the airport for like 90 hours. They kept on the plane, weren't allowed to get off the plane. But Mark Lane got out of there.
He was, he was at the, he was there when it started, if I remember correctly. So he always claimed that he was not the People's Temple lawyer. He was there. He was brought there by the People's Temple lawyer, Charles Gary, to, do some sort of presentation or to meet Jones or something. And I believe they were there when it started, and they ended up like walking out. If I'm not getting my like two stories mixed up.
Oh, no, they were there. They were there while the suicides were going on, and somehow they got out. The two, these two lawyers in these like cheap suits or whatever, like polyester suits, walking through the jungle for 24 hours. It's funny because that's just how I envisioned it too. Their briefcases. Okay, well, we gotta go. We got a deposition to get to. You know what I mean? Oh my God! Oh, I gotta laugh. Jonestown was just such a suspicious operation over there. Now, one of the last things you got here is this thing about I am seeing UFOs. What is this about?
Oh yeah, so Adam Go-Rightly, who's a
I had him on the show. Yeah.
yeah, so so I had him on, and what we were talking about is the weird intelligence connections between the UFO scene or in the UFO scene, basically how, the Paul Benowitz affair. So this guy, Paul Benowitz, who was a military contractor, started seeing weird things, in his equipment, like his radio equipment and, strange things that he videotaped near Air Force Base, which is named Kirtland Air Force Base. And he contacted the base security because he wanted to tell him what was up. And what apparently happened was Benowitz stumbled upon some top secret experimental aircraft. So the Air Force Base used this opportunity to tell him, no, there were UFOs. And basically this began this operation where for years, various people in the UFO community were receiving disinformation or misinformation from Air Force Office of Special Intelligence. And, really it's just mind-blowing that this whole UFO movement, in popular culture, X-Files, all this stuff could come from, basically an AFOSI disinformation campaign. And it just makes you wonder what else in the culture was just dreamt up by some bored intelligence officer somewhere.
Yeah, it almost seems like everything is, especially, especially if you ever looked into the work, Pierce, Pierce Rodman, yeah.
Yeah.
That they've done when he was with that guy, what I'm talking about, they're from England.
Oh, yeah, Tom Secker.
Tom Secker, right. When they looked into all the financing, the CIA financing, Cupcake Wars and American Idol and all this stuff, they got their hands in everything, And you really start to think, is it really that the CIA is just infiltrating these things? Or is it's just part of the CIA? It's just part of intelligence operation.
Yeah, I don't think Tom Secker likes me too much. He follows me on Instagram, and just every once in a while, because I have a sense of humor about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think having a sense of humor kind of offends people who take it really seriously.
I know. Secker's one of those guys. He's exploded all over me a few times, and he comes back a year later and apologizes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't bother me that much, but I don't like being insulted either. I don't like people, attacking me for no reason. What are you going to do? All right. Right. What are you working on this week?
This week, I just so I've been working on this article for the newsletter. It started as a chapter of this book I was kind of writing on again about the kind of how counterinsurgency, as the military practice overseas, which has been going on since really since we were in the Philippines, in the 1800s, was like, that's at least it's been going on for hundreds of years, but like that's when the current doctrine, that's when it was really first put together in the American military. So it's an old practice, and it's had this kind of constant interaction with American policing. People will be in the military, then they join the police, and they'd bring the military coin stuff to the police. Then the army would invade Afghanistan, and then they'd go to the LAPD or whoever to get counterinsurgency training. So it's like this back and forth thing, between the military and the police. And I'm kind of looking at that historically and then asking the question, like, how is that going to play into contact tracing, and how is that going to become basically COVID response? Like, I think COVID-19 gives, and I'm not saying it's not real or dangerous, but what's that phrase? Never let a good crisis go to waste. I think this is going to be a way for a lot of agendas, as far as, Orwellian Big Brother stuff and more like police militarization stuff, to be enacted in this country. So I'm looking at that, but it's a huge subject, and I don't know if I'm going to get it.
Are you following all that stuff with Nicole Junkerman and that? Because she's behind that software.
No, Nicole Junkerman.
Yeah, she came up. Johnny Vedmore's doing this excellent reporting on this, okay? And I think I was the first show that he came on after he wrote the article, because she was on Epstein's plane. So we do this report, and on the, and she's going all over the world because she's behind that software that does the social.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay, and she has all kinds of intelligence connections too. He calls her the Bond girl. I'll send you some links. It's a fascinating story.
Oh, please do.
And Vedmore's a great guy, man. This guy does great work. So what do you call it? So now she's all over the world making these defamation lawsuits to get the videos taken down. Well, YouTube in Britain, YouTube in England, YouTube in Germany, and Denmark, places where, it's not even in English. It's not even in the language over there. Yeah. So she's on a tear here. Every now and then I get another letter from YouTube saying a defamation lawsuit.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so check that out. One more thing, too. You mentioned about how the policing back and forth. Some friends of mine have done that. They've gone there to Iraq to train the police over there, the NYPD guys, and it's all pretty much just patronage, slush fund money going. They don't leave the hotel when they get there, man. They don't do any training. So some of that money is just payoff money.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's always been. It's killing me. I can't think of the guy's name, but he's the guy that everybody was saying was Jim Jones's handler for the CIA.
Right. Yeah, I know. The guy in Brazil. Yeah.
Yeah. He went to, he was like, he had he knew Jones because they were both in Indiana together. He was a sheriff, and then he became a consultant for the USAID and the terrorists in Brazil the Tucumaro or whatever they were called, got him. So it's like everywhere you go, there's this weird intelligence police connection. I mean, one of the big, massive intelligence. We did a whole show about
that guy you were talking about there. And when he died, they put on a whole benefit for him, and Frank Sinatra and Jerry Lewis and all those guys showed up. He was like a hero, this guy. Hey, real quick, too, because we're almost out of time. Did you catch my reporting on the coup attempt down there in Venezuela with all of Trump's bodyguards and stuff?
I've been following that. I haven't heard your episode on that yet. That is crazy.
Yeah. This one of Trump's private security guards who ran this operation. Keith Schiller was introducing them, who was Trump's longtime bodyguard, was introducing them to Maduro and all that stuff. Not Maduro, Guaidó. Trump's private security, and then also too, there's all guys connected with Rudy Giuliani and drug smuggle and money laundering down there. Giuliani's client was part of this whole thing. This is Trump's private coup, funded by drug dealers and coke dealers, money launderers, and his private security guards.
Yeah, I was wondering about that connection because I understood that the company did security at Trump events, which how many security companies have been hired by Trump to do security at events, but you're saying that the connection was that it was his private security guards?
Keith Schiller, his private bodyguard, for years and years and years, like I know Keith Schiller. I did work for Keith Schiller. And Keith Schiller back then used to recruit for Blackwater back in those days. But Keith Schiller introduced that guy, Guadir, whatever his name is, the guy who stayed here in the United States and didn't go down there, but started tweeting about the invasion. He introduced him to Guaidó.
Oh man, I got to catch up. It's like you don't listen to podcasts when you're busy recording them. So I gotta.
You know what, too, man, you're better off, do your own research and stuff like that, because there's so much disinfo out there. Everybody, talking about crap, repeating stuff they saw on YouTube and stuff like that. What do you want to leave us with, my friend? We're out of time.
Okay, so I got to mention my new article. It's coming out in next month, so like June 2nd, on a website called pleasekillme.com, which is this great, kind of like pop culture / like rock and roll, punk rock / kind of some like true crime website. Pleasekillme.com, and it's I have an article coming out called "The Cult of Cosmopop." Now, we didn't even touch upon this cult, Gabriel Virancha, the so-called prophet from Pittsburgh. His music career. He wants to be a huge musician. Right. He records all these really ridiculous albums. And he calls his genre of music cosmopop. But I'm doing an article for them, and it's coming out, like I said, June 2nd, and it's a kind of a breakdown of the cult story with all these more details about the new details that I, have really releasing for the first time on this podcast, talking to you. It's going to come out in this article, and people should definitely check it out.
Excellent. LennyFlatley.net. Check it out. So-Called Prophet of Pittsburgh. And the other one is called, what's that other thing called? Update something?
Failed State Update.
Failed State Update. And I encourage people to go back and listen to my previous interviews with Lenny Flatley on Spreaker.com. And if you're listening to this on AM/FM radio, I do a 1-hour solo show that's only on the internet. You can find it on Spreaker. And I did a whole long report on Trump, private security, and coke dealers invading Venezuela. Okay? And I encourage people to go check that out too, because it got a lot of reaction after I did that, man. It was this stuff in there that no one would know, because I know these guys. All right, Lenny Flatley, man, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ed.
Good night.